I mean, there were some roles that took me to therapy, like there were roles where there was a role that I was experiencing. I was working on this play called, I think it was called The Motherfucker with the Hat. And it was this role of a woman who was an addict. And she was an addict, and it was very interesting because it like helped me touch on like a really dark side of myself. And
Mm,
so then I started going and studying like what happens to women, like what was happening to women around that time. And then I was kind of feeling so much of that, like the abuse, like what
mm,
happens to women when there's no protection and poverty. And I got so much into the story that it started to feel like it was happening to me, and I started to feel on alert. And that's the power of images, and at
mm,
the time I didn't have the kind of tools that I have now. I started
mm,
to look at like her story and how she had been gone through. I mean, it had a tether, like a feather of the same kind of signature of some of the things that I went through, but just extreme, dramatized. And because it touched something in me, and perhaps a different lifetime from things that I have
mm,
gone through, or like perhaps things in my lineage, it made me so sensitive, and it just put me in such a depressed state. From that experience, I realized, in hindsight, of course, the power of the information that we consume and the
mm.
environments that we put
Oh
ourselves in.
yeah.
Because like if we're looking at the news, if we're looking at all the bad things that are happening in the world, and I'm using my imagination to essentially self hypnotize myself, to go into that world, to live it, to think about it, to be so involved in it that it starts to become my expectation, then
Mm,
it's like now we're really hurting ourselves. And so from
mm,
that I started to realize, when I was out of that experience and I was looking back, I started to realize, thank God, because I was gifted The Loss of Success by Napoleon Hill. And he
mm,
speaks about autosuggestion and how suggestive we are as human beings. And I was so grateful that I got that book when I was at such a young age, because I got kicked out of my house at 17, so I was on my
mm,
own very early. And just having like mentors, this person lived many, many years ago, but he was one of my mentors of understanding how the mind work. And so it took me out of acting. Actually, that was the first time I left acting, because I was like, I didn't have the tools, and I had to do my own work. I had to do
yeah.
my own inner healing. And so when it comes to really understanding how our brain is essentially, I like to think about it as like our consciousness is like sunlight. You put the sunlight on some seeds and those seeds just grow. And so it's the same way, like whatever I'm giving my sunshine of consciousness to is just making it grow. It's giving life. Like this consciousness of ours is like life making, life giving. And so if we start to understand that, and you can think about like, why not start to study the lives of people I admire, and why not start
Mm,
to study the archetypes of people in history that made amazing things, and start to obsess about it, and look at their life and their story, and really think about how can I get those qualities, how can I
mm,
adopt those qualities into my life so that it becomes my expectation.